Well, I'm back from my holidays and out for a walk with my buddy, my friend, the professor. Um, just been away for a week in the Italian Alps, which was beautiful, and now back to my day job in the Forest of Dean. And even in that week that I've been away, I can really notice the difference. Spring really feels like it's in the air now. It's still a bit nippy, but the bird song has definitely intensified. You'll hear it all around me as we go for our walk. The air just feels brighter as well. Lots of wild garlic all around us too. The garlic spreading out, I can smell it here as we're moving through the forest. So another few weeks and the stalks will be coming up and the flowers will come out in the garlic as well. So it's quite a nice time of year in the forest. Anyway, I wanted to use this video and this walk to tell you a little bit more about my journey, my story with my buddy, the prof. So he's lived with me for almost 13 years now. I rehomed Professor, he's just done a poo. I rehomed Professor when he was 6 years old. He was born in captivity, so by law, birds of prey born in captivity need to stay captive. You cannot release them into the wild. It's illegal, it would be immoral and irresponsible to do that. They just wouldn't survive. So my first ranger job up in the English Midlands, we had an animal man, Nick, who used to come on site and run education sessions for visitors to the centre. Nick was fantastic, very charismatic, very educational. He had meerkats, skunks, owls, chinchillas, snakes. And I built up a strong working relationship with Nick professionally and personally, got on really well together. And Nick said to me one day, "Gerry, I could really do with some extra space. I'm getting some more animals in." He said, "Perhaps you could look after a couple of my owls for me." Now, I said, "Nick, I've got no experience with owls. How am I going to do that?" But with a bit of gentle guidance and coaxing and learnings from Nick, I got quite confident in handling owls, and I ended up taking ownership on a temporary basis of Misty, a beautiful female barn owl. And I looked after Misty for probably 3.5 years or so. I also looked after a little owl called Al. I loved Al, he was a character. Harder work than Misty, but he was a great character. So I got lots of learnings in that time. I had lots of fun with the owls, getting confident in handling them, using them for education and to enthuse about owls. There were some challenges along the way, but it was all learnings. Eventually, the time came to move on from that job. And of course, I was a bit sad. I was perplexed. What am I going to do? I can't leave those owls. But Nick needed to find a new home for Mr. Professor here. And Prof was 6 at the time. So Professor came to live with me in my house in northwest Leicestershire, South Derbyshire kind of border where we lived at the time. And I had a nice aviary in the back garden. I used to do long walks with him in the evenings around the local woodlands and fields, and really built up our bond together. And eventually, when I moved down here to the Forest of Dean, of course Professor came with me too. He's been part of our family life. My daughter has grown up alongside him. We've got photographs of her as a baby with Prof and as a little girl. She's now 11, so we've got quite a catalogue of photographs of the two of them together. And Prof's been with me. He comes out on some of my ranger walks and talks. He's brought a lot of joy and magic to lots of other people too, not just me. But he is getting on now. He's 18, almost 19. He'll be 19 in May. And I'm very conscious that he needs a bit more chill time. So he's officially retired now. I've taken back him the way I used to use him for walks and talks, and now it's just myself, my daughter, my ranger colleague Sally helps out, and we just go for nice gentle walks around the forest together. And one of my favourite things to do is just bring him down into the woods, give him a little perch spot, and let him just enjoy a bit of stimulation and a bit of sunshine sometimes, and all the sights and sounds around him. But when I was away on my holiday just last week, we had a bit of a scare. I have seen the signs of aging in Professor, which is horrible, you know. I've been bracing myself, if I'm honest, for a while. I went through a phase last year where I felt like I was mourning him, and he's still here with me now, of course. But somebody said to me, that's anticipatory grief. You're bracing yourself for when the inevitable happens. And I have noticed that he's slowed down. He's a bit more imbalanced. He's a little bit more doddery, not quite as energetic as he used to be. And that comes to all of us. But he's still in good health, as you can see. He's just looking at me searchingly there. But when I was away in Italy last week, and I got a couple of heartfelt calls from Sally, who said that she was really worried about him. He wasn't looking so good, and she was genuinely worried that he might pass away. And needless to say, I was very upset and traumatized, I guess. You know, when I really feel into my relationship, my bond with Professor, it's deep. It's deep. We've been with each other through trials and tribulations over the last few years, good times and bad. I did a previous video about how nature can help to heal our pain, and I spoke about when my little nephew Owen died, which was a huge shock and sent me reeling. And I remember not long after receiving that phone call from my mum, one of the first things I did was take Professor for a long walk into the forest. And in the midst of my trauma and pain and anguish, Professor was with me. When I went through my relationship breakup about 3 years ago now, that was a really hard time in my life also. Lots to process, lots to grieve, lots to mourn. And Professor again was my constant companion. One of my ways to deal with that trauma and pain was to go for long, mindful walks in the forest with Professor. And sometimes we would just sit amongst the trees quietly in each other's company. Other times we would maybe do a more vigorous hike, but we'd spend lots of time together too. So he's been that companion for me when life's been at its toughest. But also in the good times, when I set up late at night doing my university degree, buried in assignments into the early hours of the morning, Professor would often be snoozing on the chair contentedly beside me. And when I wrote my book, Wildlife Whispers, Professor would often keep me company during my creative phases and writing phases. So he's been a companion through good times and bad. Always there, constant in my life. And when the inevitable finally comes, it's going to be a huge emotional wrench for me. Oh, getting himself a little tangled up. But I don't want to write him off just yet. I think he seems back to himself a bit now, and I'm ever grateful to Sally, my colleague, for bringing him back from the brink for me. And he seems more himself again. He seems more full of life again. And I'm hoping I have lots more quality time with him. So over the next couple of years, hopefully, and more, I'm going to really embrace and be thankful for every day that I have with him, which I always did anyway, but I think I'm even more mindful of that now. He's a beautiful boy. He's brought lots of magic into my world and into the world of anyone who's met him over the years. So many people have spoke highly about how Prof brought a little sprinkling of magic into their life. So we're all grateful to him for that, and we hope to have many more happy days with him. So I'll share our journey as we move forward over the time ahead. And for now, we're going to continue our beautiful walk in the woodlands and enjoy the sights and sounds of spring.